Hi everyone, my name is Tanya and I serve as the pastor at Trinity Lutheran in New Hamburg. It's so great to be with you all this week for Bridges VBS. Today I'd like to tell you the story about Jesus and how he feeds 5,000 gathered people. It seems like a lot, so it's a really great story. The story begins with Jesus having sent his disciples out into the country in order to find new people to tell them about who God is and about God's love for them. The disciples, upon returning from their journey, were so excited to tell Jesus about all the interesting people they had met, to share with him the stories and the connections that they had made. The problem is that those people that they had encountered followed them back, because having heard about who this Jesus was and who God is and God's love, they wanted to learn more. They wanted to meet Jesus for themselves. And so the disciples really didn't have a chance to talk to Jesus, to tell them what it is they had learned and who they had met and what they had shared. So Jesus says to them, you know what? Let's go away to a quiet place so that you guys can rest and we can share your stories there. So Jesus and the disciples climbed on a boat and they sailed across the lake to a quiet place. But the crowd saw them going, and so they ran around the land to the other side of the lake, and they actually beat Jesus and his disciples there. That's how excited they were to meet Jesus and to hear more of his stories. So the disciples didn't really get any time with Jesus, but instead Jesus noticed that the people were hungry. And Jesus said to the disciples, you should feed the people. And so we have the story here of Jesus feeding, talking to his disciples about how they need to feed the people. But one disciple said to Jesus, Jesus, it would take us a year of work in order to be able to afford to feed all of these people. There's so many of them. And Jesus recognized a little boy in the crowd, and the little boy had a little picnic lunch. And Jesus said to his disciples, go with the little boy and take the food to the crowd and feed them. And that's what they did. The little boy and one of the disciples went over and they shared the food with all of the people. And the people ate. There was so much food. Even though the boy only had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes, the people ate and they were hungry. And when the disciple and the boy returned back to where Jesus was, not only was there still food in the boy's basket, but there was an abundance of food. More food than they had started with. God had provided out of God's abundance. It's a really great story about how Jesus taught his disciples the importance of sharing. Sharing out of abundance. An abundance that God had provided. There's lots of places in our world today that are in need of knowing about God's abundance and God's love. And in today's story, Jesus reminds us that there's always more than enough food and more than enough of God's love to share. No one should have to be hungry. So how do we make sure that the food that we seem to have an abundance of makes its way to all the corners of the world so that no one has to experience hunger? Well, in our country, we have an organization called the Canadian Lutheran World Relief. And they partner with Lutheran congregations and people like you and me to raise awareness and funds so that they can send resources all over the world to help people with what we call food insecurity, not enough food, or emergency care that they might need. CLWR partners with all kinds of people. And right now they're doing important work in a place called Burundi, which is in East Africa, where they're continuing to deliver emergency food to the people there. And they're training the people how to grow their own produce and food so that it's sustainable and can continue so that they can provide for themselves. We help them do that with CLWR in providing tools and resources. There's another place in East Africa called Ethiopia, where CLWR also sends emergency food, but they also support small-scale farmers with little farms in their food production. There's a new project there right now that helps the vulnerable refugees get access to clean water, which is so very important. They provide shelter, and they provide protection and education for women and young girls. And maybe some of you have heard about what's happening in Ukraine, which is in Europe. CLWR is providing shelter to the nearly 14 million people who have been displaced from their homes because of war. They're providing shelter and food and emergency supplies and medical equipment to those people who need it there. CLWR is at work all over the world, and they do that because of the support that we offer to them through our churches as individuals. Our mission is to do what Jesus said: feed the people. Tell them about God's love. Show them God's abundance. That is what I hope we do in this week of Bridges VBS, that we know how much God loves each of us and loves everyone in the world, that God provides abundantly for each of us and for everyone in the world. I hope you have a great week. It's been so great to be with you. Take care.